The life review is like watching your entire life played out like a movie, but in fast motion, and focusing on peak experiences, both good and bad, very emotion-laden experiences.
Basically, we can see exactly who we are. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm a very kind person. It's another to look into your life and see all the ways you really were kind, or all the ways that perhaps you were less kind than you could have been.
Today, I'd like to welcome Peter Alessandria to Conscious Conversations. Peter, welcome. It's an honor to have you here on the show.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Yes, I'm so sad that I missed the premiere of your documentary when we were at IANS. I still had my kids to be responsible for, but I'm really excited today to talk to you about it. And I have so many curiosities that are just building around this documentary. So before we get into that, I really would like it if you could share how this documentary even came into manifestation.
So that's a great question. Thanks again for the invitation. And I'm sorry you missed it. It was actually a preview at the IANS conference. For anybody who's not familiar, IANS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Amazing, amazing group of people. So check it out, ians.org. And they've been a friend of the project since the beginning, actually. And they invited me to come this year to the conference in Phoenix and share. Originally, it was just going to be a 5-minute preview. And then when they found out how many people from the film were going to be at the conference, it turned into a 2-hour time slot. And so I showed the preview was about 1 hour and 10 minutes, and then we did a Q&A with the audience afterwards. There were 12 people from the film there, which was great because I hadn't seen a lot of the people since I interviewed them. In some cases, it was almost over a year, actually. So the way this came into being, it's actually a 30-year story. So I'll condense it down to the most pertinent points. But I started on my own journey probably 30 years ago when I moved from New York to California. I got involved in all kinds of personal growth, spiritual growth, self-help, 12-step fellowships. And it opened up my world, to something greater than myself in many ways. And I had this natural curiosity, and I just started studying and reading, and none of it was formal. It was all on my own. And this was back in the 90s. So there wasn't a lot online yet or anything like that. I was actually reading books, things like A Course in Miracles, the Conversations with God books, but more esoteric stuff as well. And it just became a fascination for me. And so I was working as an entertainment attorney at the time in LA, and I had my first exposure to the film business and got really excited about that, the creative process, creating visual imagery and projects. And eventually what happened was in 2009, and so I worked as an attorney for almost 20 years. And while I was working as my day job, on my nights and weekends, I was studying filmmaking and photography. And I started making a bunch of short films. And then in 2009, when the global financial crisis hit, I actually lost my law practice. And I spent about 6 months trying to resurrect that. It wasn't happening. And I just looked at this as a sign from the universe. Maybe this is an opportunity. While I enjoyed being an attorney, and I was certainly grateful and appreciative of all that it provided me, in terms of financial resources and education and all that, it was never my passion. It wasn't who I was. But I really loved filmmaking. I really loved photography. So I kind of took that time in 2009 and decided I'm going to do the creative stuff full time. I also decided to move back to the East Coast. I'm from the New York City area. My sisters, I don't have any children of my own, but my sisters started having kids and my parents were getting a little older. So it was time for me to come back closer to the family. I'm now in northern New Jersey, about a half hour, 40 minutes from New York City. And for 3 years, Christina, I sat on the couch, right? I had this whole vision, this whole plan. I was going to create this business doing photography, commercial photography, fine art photography, filmmaking, video production, and nothing was happening. I set up some websites, And originally I thought it was, the economy, because the economy was still kind of rough. And then I thought, well, it's not the economy, but it's, I don't have I never studied art. I never studied photography. I never studied filmmaking. So that must be the problem. I had a whole list of reasons why things weren't working out. But one day it occurred to me, the problem wasn't out there. The problem was in here, right? And I had a really negative self-image when it came to being a creative person. And I was terrified to put myself out there. I was afraid of criticism, rejection, all of that. After almost 3 years, the money started to run out. I'd saved up a lot of cash, and the money was gone. And it was like, all right, I really got to make this happen. And so I started applying all the stuff that I've been studying for the last 20 years, everything from, using affirmations and vision boards and law of attraction and all of that stuff, self-love, self-forgiveness. And I went from, and within about maybe 10 or 12 months, I went from somebody who had never won an award for anything in my life to somebody who has won more than 75 awards for my photography. I went from somebody who was afraid to post photos on Facebook, terrified to post my photos on Facebook, to somebody whose photos have been published in newspapers and magazines and online around the world. Literally millions of people have seen my work. And all of this came through what I call my transformation from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend, because it was never anybody else's criticism of me that was the problem. It was that self-criticism, that self-rejection that was generating that fear. Fear equals resistance, and resistance means I don't get off the couch, right? So that transformation happened, and for the last almost 15 years, 12 plus years, I've been working as a professional photographer and filmmaker. As I was sharing with you earlier, in 2019, I actually injured my leg, and I was out of commission for almost 9 months. And I had been thinking for many years, I'd been thinking about writing a book about this transformation from lawyer to photographer. And in the moment that I injured myself, I did hear a message from my guides, from spirit, whatever you want to call it, which said, now you can write your book. And because I was completely out of commission for almost a year, 9 months plus. But that night I started writing the book, and I didn't stop till it was finished. And the title of that book is Be Bigger Than You Think You Are, Overcoming Our Self-Imposed Limits to Have the Life We Want. And I go through my whole process of how I transformed my life from somebody, again, who was afraid to post photos on Facebook to somebody, National Geographic has featured my photos on their website. The Huffington Post did a piece on me. NBC TV New York, ABC TV New York, all these, media outlets. And it was really me I became an official photographer for one of the world's largest fireworks performance companies. And they sent me around the world taking pictures of their shows. This is all from a guy who never even took a photography class, who never took an art appreciation class in college, So it was a complete transformation. And in 2019, while I was recovering and I was writing my book, I also read a novel. And the novel was entitled Adventures in the Afterlife, and it was written by William Buhlman. Now, some of your viewers may know William. William was one of the lead instructors at the Monroe Institute. He teaches out-of-body experiences. He's written a bunch of nonfiction books about how to have an out-of-body experience, but this was his one novel. He recently completed a second one. And I had some interest in kind of the near-death thing, but I hadn't really immersed myself in any of that. But when I read this novel, I said, wow, first of all, it was just really interesting to me because the whole movie takes place in the afterlife. But I also thought this would make a great film, right? Long story short, as I reached out to William, I eventually did an option agreement with him where I optioned the novel, and I wrote a screenplay based on that to turn into a film. It's a really big budget film, like a huge budget film, because the whole film, as I said, takes place in the afterlife, a lot of visual effects. But while I was working on that screenplay, I started watching a lot of YouTube videos with near-death experiencers. And at the time, I just thought it was research. But what happened was I started reaching out to people, some of these people that I saw, and a lot of them got back to me. And I started Zooming with them, and I wasn't even sure why. All right. Now, we have a mutual friend, Christian Sundberg. Christian was one of the first people that I reached out to, and I had a Zoom set up with him that afternoon. And that morning, I'm making my breakfast, and I'm waiting for the toast to pop up. And when the toast pops up, an idea pops into my head, which is, you have to do a documentary about all this. And that was the beginning of it. And Christian was one of the first people I asked, and I eventually went to him. He's in Erie, Pennsylvania. It's about 7 hours from me. I put all my stuff in my car. I drove out there, I interviewed him, and it went from there. And to date, I've interviewed, this is about a year and a half ago. To date, I've interviewed 55 people. Probably about half of them have had near-death experiences or other spiritually transformative experiences. The rest are channels, mediums, psychics.
Wow, your story is so inspiring, and what I love about it is it's so relatable. There are so many people, me included. I was raising my hand like the whole time you were talking, like being afraid, or very self-conscious, or not confident in our creative endeavors, or with our passions. Really, it sounds like photography was a passion that was just bubbling up for you. And so thank you so much for giving that whole picture. I'm sure we could do another conversation about your book because now I'm interested in that. But what I love too is Christian Sundberg. So a year and a half ago was when my podcast was launched, a little less than a year and a half ago. So, and he was the catalyst that that really drove it in for me to say, okay, this is what I'm doing. So yeah. Christian, if you're listening, we're so grateful. We love you.
Christian's great. He's great. I mean, he's a really beautiful human being. And I have to say, every one of these people that I've met over the last year and a half is very similar. I mean, these people are amongst the most kindest and compassionate and loving and helpful people that I've ever met in my life, you know, and again, this is a testament to IONS, you know, it's made up of these people, and that's been one of the best parts of this process for me is I get to hang out with all these people, you know, and they've all touched me in very powerful ways. I'm sure you've had similar experiences with your guests. So grateful for all of that.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that, you know, and I'm curious about some of your findings. So I've interviewed a pretty good amount of near-death experiencers, and one of the common themes that I find is that when they're on the other side, two things: it's more real than this reality, and it's so clear that love is the purpose, is the thing, right? And so I love that you have the same experience I have, or we'll say similar experience, because I don't know if it's the same, but everyone I've talked to when I was at the conference, there was just pure acceptance, belonging. And I attest that to, you know, they've gotten a huge dose of unconditional love. And I'm curious what you'd have to say about that.
Well, so yeah, I mean, that's my experience as well. And it's very interesting because a couple of things come up. Well, first is, you know, a lot of these people, none of them that I've met, I mean, some of them are doing okay, but none of them are really getting rich off sharing their experience. And in fact, it's often just the opposite. You know, they subject themselves at times to ridicule, to, you know, shaming. You know, I mean, it's gotten better. I think certainly in recent years, it's gotten a lot better. But for a long time, you know, a lot of these people, I don't know if you know Franco Romero. Franco's book is The Closet Spiritualist. He was literally in the closet for like many of these people for decades. He was afraid to tell people about the experience because he was afraid of being marginalized, of shamed, of made fun of in school, you know, all of that. So these people, when they come out and tell their story, you know, they're really doing it because they want to help humanity. You know, they want to make a difference, a positive difference in the world. And it's not just attention. It's not just, you know, they think they're going to get rich selling books or whatever it is. You know, it's almost the opposite. So my hat is off to each one of them. They've inspired me with their courage, with their fortitude, you know, and their willingness to really have a positive impact on the world. The other thing that I'll say is, a lot of people will dismiss the near-death experience as the symptoms of a dying mind, an hallucination, endorphins, lack of oxygen, all of that. I think the science has pretty much debunked all of that. And if you read Eben Alexander's book, and I interviewed Eben, and people like that, I think it's you really got to be very thick-headed about it to still cling to this idea that it's all a function of the dying mind. But here's the biggest thing for me: a hallucination doesn't change a person. People don't change their lifestyle. They don't change their relationships. They don't change their job based on a hallucination. And many of these people have done, in some cases, a 180 in terms of, being very kind of self-driven, self-centered, maybe selfish in some of their relationships, or, it's all about me, trying to get ahead in the world. A lot of these people now have a very service-oriented outlook on life. They try to be of service to the world. They try to, make the world a better place, and they're putting others before themselves. Hopefully not in a codependent way, but in a real positive way, where this is because they know who they are, they know their connection to other people, and they want to express that here while we're still bumping into each other in these bodies. The title of my film is What Every Soul Knows: The Joy of Remembering Who We Really Are. And this comes from at least my belief that true happiness is only possible when we do know who we really are. And one of the main messages of the film is that we're not who we think we are, and what's going on here is not what we think it is. And there's a separate website that I set up. So the film website is whateverysoulknows.com. And there's a nonprofit website I set up called itstimetoRemember.org that has a lot of the key messages from the film there that people can share. There's no subscription. I'm not even taking donations. I just have it set up that if people want to share the messages from the film, they can do that.
Yeah.
And, messages like we are eternal spiritual beings. We were created by love, as love, and for love. There is no death. We are one with everyone and everything. We are here by choice. We chose to be here at this time. And not only did we choose to be here, we came with a purpose.
Yeah.
We came to accomplish something. And often it's something that benefits us, but it's also to benefit other people. Whether it's family members or the world at large, we came with a dual purpose, something that would help us grow, expand, evolve, and would also make a contribution to the world. And it doesn't have to be grandiose. It's not saving the world. I mean, your purpose could be being a great grandmother to your grandchildren and to your neighbors, a great neighbor to your neighbors. But the point is, we came with a purpose. We're here by choice. And I end that with, isn't it time that we got on with it? Because we're wasting so much time focused on things that ultimately don't matter.
Yes to all of it. And, I'm curious if you had a similar experience to me. So to give a little bit of background, I had my idea, my vision for the podcast, Conscious Conversations. I had not actually had exposure to near-death experiences, but with all the exposure, I did 12-step, ACIM, A Course in Miracles, Way of Mastery, studied many teachers like Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, all the whole space. I was in it, deeply in it, Christ consciousness, everything. And once I started listening to near-death experiences, after I heard Christian Sundberg's story about his pre-birth memories, what happened for me was all of this conceptual stuff, right? Like all these words, all these chapters, all these different concepts. When I heard near-death experiencers share their story, it's like my head and my heart merged into one. Like I could feel what they were saying as true, and it aligned with all the stuff that I resonated with intellectually. And so I'm curious, you said that you were really delving into a lot of different works, and then you discovered near-death experiences. What was that like for you?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's similar for me. I can just start weeping in the middle of somebody's story. I have this sense of a wave of emotion that comes through me, and that was one of the criteria when I reached out to people for the film. It was my reaction to them and to their story. And like you, I've never had a near-death experience. I mean, other than hearing that one message from a guide or wherever it was from, and then one other time, which amounts to less than a minute probably and I'm well into my middle age, in my entire life, I haven't had any spiritually transformative, I mean, not specific events at least. I have had an evolution, I have had a growth of my understanding, but for me, it's basically an intuitive knowing. And people ask me, why are you doing this? And I have to say, I don't know exactly why I'm doing this film, other than there's nothing else I want to do. There's nothing else that I'm interested in. And I do feel like this is part of my mission, my calling, my purpose, and that is, so it's this intuitive knowing. And so this comes very close to home. My mom is not a believer. My mom, she says, I love you very much, Peter. I love that you're doing this and you're so excited about it. But I have to tell you, I think this is all a big fairy tale. And her thing is, she believes in evolution and, the world just kind of, life just kind of came along through a series of random events, and then it has evolved to this point. And when you die, that's it. And she talks a lot about coincidences, but she says that's just it. They're just coincidences. There's no meaning behind any of them. And we had this conversation Sunday night. So at the IANS conference, I screened the preview I mentioned. I showed that to my sister, my niece, my younger niece and nephew, and my mom Sunday night. And at the end, my mom, I love her. She's great. We've come a long way, certainly in our relationship. But she is so firm in her belief that, this is all just made up, And so it's been great because I get to allow her to have her belief. And at various times I've tried to convince her and all that. And I'm like, you can't convince anybody of this stuff. You can't. And I say that at the beginning of the film. I said, this is a very personal journey for you. Nobody can tell you what's true about the afterlife, about your connection with your soul. I said, don't take anybody's word for it. Don't take anybody's word for anything that you see or hear in this film, but use everything that you see and hear in this film to discover your own truth, your own inner wisdom, your own highest truth about all of this, because ultimately that's all that matters. None of us will know for sure until we get there. The people who've been there, obviously they've had their experience, but it's also been shown to me that not everybody has the same experience. The experiences all vary. There's some commonalities and some similar themes, but the actual experience is often very different. So I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I have 3 goals with this film, and I'm going to show you guys a clip in a few minutes here. The first goal is this is my contribution to the awakening. There seems to be a raising of consciousness, raising of vibration, more influx of spirit, of spirituality. And so this is for the people who, and I do say this is Afterlife 101, this film. This is for people who maybe never even heard of an NDE. They don't know what an NDE is, or STE, or pre-birth memories, or whatever. And I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but I'm presenting another way perhaps to look at things. And I think the people who go there have some subconscious memory or recognition of this, and hopefully it'll help spur some people on. The second goal for the film is about half the people in the film are fairly well known, in the space, but the other half you've never seen or heard of before. And I specifically chose a mix like that because I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to shine. I found people that resonated with me, and I felt, it was really important for me to give them an opportunity to be seen by the world, And so that's been really rewarding for me. And and a beautiful part of this journey. And I'm treating everybody the same. Doesn't matter if you've had a New York Times bestseller or if you have, 1,000 subs on YouTube. It doesn't matter. I'm treating everybody the same. And it's been great. My hope for this is that it puts a lot of people on the map to help people, to get their message out there. And the third thing is, for me personally, I'm hoping that this will open some doors for me down the road, because I have a bunch of these that I want to do, a bunch of kind of spiritually uplifting projects. My company is called Mindful Entertainment, as opposed to Mindless Entertainment. Mindfulentertainment.us is the website. And I have a bunch of these projects that I want to do. So hopefully this will open some doors going forward. The other thing I want to say real quickly is that it was very important for me not to sensationalize the NDEs, not to sensationalize the car accident, the illness, the botched surgery. In fact, I went so far to the other extreme that the first 40 people I interviewed, I didn't let any of them tell their story. Instead, what I did was I had a list of 35 questions, and these were my questions that I wanted answers to. So starting with, what is the soul? What's the soul's relation to God? Do we have soul families that we incarnate with over and over again? Are there contracts or agreements between souls? What's the purpose of life on the physical plane? Why would a soul choose to leave heaven? Is there such a thing as hell? Are we judged or punished in the afterlife? On and on and on. And I really kind of limited everybody to those questions. And that was great. You'll see an example of that in a minute. But then about 4 or 5 months ago, I realized, there is a lot of value in hearing the first person account of the story. But what I was very adamant, I want to spend 5 minutes or less on the car accident. And the rest of the time, I want to hear about what you learned, what you experienced, what that was like. Right. So that was just really important to me. I also don't want to exploit anybody's stories. I don't want to sensationalize it. I don't want to scare the audience in any way. I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. This is about empowering people, uplifting people, giving people some hope. One of the last questions I ask everybody is, can you share a message of hope with us? Because there's a lot of craziness happening out there right now. And it's my sense. All right, I'm not going to say what's going to happen in the future, but buckle up. It could get a little crazy.
I think it's already at crazy. So yeah, crazier. Yeah, well, this is so phenomenal. So I'm so excited to have you share a clip of your documentary. Are we ready to do that now?
Yeah, did you enable sharing?
I did.
All right, so let's see. Upon return to the afterlife, souls usually experience a review of the lifetime just completed. This is commonly referred to as the life review.
The unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates.
Describe the life review.
So when you have the life review, as I understand it, you're surrounded by your guides, and you're in this environment of tremendous unconditional love, unconditional support, and you're shown the scenes from the previous incarnation.
In the life review in heaven, you are simultaneously you again doing whatever scene is in front of you, and you are simultaneously the people around you. So you become every person you've ever interacted with, and you experience what they experienced in reaction to what you did.
Basically, we can see exactly who we are. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm a very kind person. It's another to look into your life and see all the ways you really were kind, or all the ways that perhaps you were less kind than you could have been.
The purpose of the life review is educational. It's so that we can really understand the impact that we've had upon others, good or bad.
The life review is like watching your entire life played out like a movie, but in fast motion, and focusing on peak experiences, both good and bad, very emotion-laden experiences.
Life review has everything to do with accountability. Let's just say you hurt another person. You're not only gonna see how you made the other person feel. You're going to feel how you made the other person feel.
Say if we were, as a kid, a bully to another child, we actually experience how that child felt when we were being a bully towards them.
For me, my life review was so incredibly dense because I was not only experiencing emotions from my perspective, but I was feeling it from the other person's perspective as well. So every time that I caused harm to another person, which was very often in my life, I was experiencing that back to me.
Whenever you see in your life review something that was negative, it doesn't feel good. I mean, during my life review, I felt terrible about the things I did, but I was immediately answered by Source, by my soul family around me, that no one judges except for you.
When I died, my soul family took me into a life review. And I was a brash young man, and I did a lot of unsavory things in my life before I died. And I got to relive that. And I got to see that, not only from my perspective, but from everyone I'd ever interacted with. But not only was I experiencing that way, my soul family was experiencing it the same way. And that was rough for me because I didn't want them to see. In fact, I felt ashamed of some of the things that I had done in life.
In the life review, there is an opportunity to experience more vividly what your actions resulted in other people, whether you delighted them, maybe you healed someone with just smiling at them walking down the street, or maybe you were really kind of an asshole and you get to see what that was like for the other person.
How we also, on the opposite end, how we also made people happy and joyous in ways that we oftentimes didn't even know we did. Just the subtlest things that we did in our lives.
It was the tiny things. It was paying the toll for the car behind me. It was taking the time to hold someone's hand and look them in the eye when we were having a conversation. It was these tiny things, these wonderful tiny things that were the most relevant things during my life review.
My life review, which I did get to have a life review, it was very quick. I saw very fastly the bad things I ever did, all of them. Every single thing I ever did, from the smallest of age up to the age that I had crossed over. I'm a firm believer that now is the day, now is the time that you should go and recompense or repair the wrongdoing that you do. Don't wait until the life review.
Can you review your life in your life? Can you see the ripple effect now? Can you see how your words impact people now? Don't wait for the life review. Bring the awareness of a life review into the now, into how you're choosing to be now.
In 1994, Bill Tortorella had a near-death experience after falling ill at a trade show in Tucson, Arizona. As part of his near-death experience, Bill had a life review.
I'm starting to move, and I'm moving faster and faster, and I'm feeling embraced. I'm feeling nothing but love. And I'll never forget my arrival, which I'll call heaven. I said, I'm home. I'm finally home. I said that over and over. And then I hear the soft voice in my ear say, yes, Bill, you're home in the light of God. And then he said, we're going for a life review. And we move to a totally different plateau or area. It's beautiful. It's illuminated with magnificent color. They start showing me, like if you realize how a motion picture used to work, like a flickering camera moving at high speeds, and the reel is running and running and running, and then it stops. It stops at periods of my life. It started when I was a young boy. Sometimes my mom would give me some money. I would take it. I'm seeing this now. I'm seeing this in the life review. So she would tell me, take your friends along with you. So we took them out. I took them to the movies. We went to Coney Island. We used to get in. One time we got in, we went to the World's Fair. This stopped at all these moments. It was beautiful. So now it's flickering again. It's moving. And they keep showing me, you know, scene after scene of all the good things I've done, you know. But then they turn it. And now they're showing me all the wrongs, all the bad things that I've done in life. And they start again when I'm a young boy, teenager. And, you know, when you're a teenager, you do little stupid things here and there. The flickering screen's rolling again, and now we stop. And it's at the point in life where I'm married to my first wife with a 2-year-old son. And I decide to leave. I believe now, and I know in my heart, that those are the years of being young and dumb. And the difference now was I not only seen the pain that I caused, I physically became their pain. I felt the hurt. Whereas when it happened in life, you know, when you're selfish and things like that, when it actually happened, I wasn't thinking about their pain. But now I turn into them. I see their side. I feel their side. I feel their emotion. I feel their tears. I feel their inside hurt. I had no idea I caused that kind of pain. It got so bad, I started screaming. I remember screaming in my spirit, saying, I'm sorry. Please, God, forgive me. When I said, please, God, forgive me, all the grayness dropped. So if we could get some information across to the audience, the people, it's that we want to make things right before we go home again. So while we're still living and we realize we're old enough to realize we did something wrong in life, go back, try to do the right thing.
I just want to say, you know, thank you so much for following your passion and for going down this journey and then compiling all of it in that way. Like, it's pretty awesome. Pretty empowering.
I have close to 100 hours of footage, and right now it looks like I have a 6-hour documentary. So I got to figure out how to break it up into bite-sized chunks. You know, it's like I said, there's 34 more questions that I ask, and I have I think about 15 total first-person experiences. You know, near death and other experiences. So I have to find a way to put that all together. Still working on that, but I was originally hoping to have it done by the end of this year, but I don't think that's going to happen. I did 4 more interviews just at the conference. So I'm telling people spring of 2025. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I love that you chose the life review as the clip to present here on this episode of this podcast, because I find that the life reviews are so fascinating. And one of the guests or the stars of your show, you know, they had mentioned, or several of them had mentioned, like, don't wait until you're gone to do the life review. And I know you've had experience with 12-step, and what was happening for me was just kind of like, oh my gosh, that's why we do step 4. That's why we do a personal inventory, you know, and we do it with a sense to find the places that we've harmed others so that we can make amends. And I'm just curious, like, what's your input on that? Because like, I feel like I'm having like, light bulbs and all these things happening over here in my energy awareness.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have 26 years sobriety. I have a lot of, 20 plus years of 3 different programs. Yeah, step 4, step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. The thing to remember is, so it's harm to others, but it's also harm to ourselves. One of the biggest amends that I did was to make an amends to myself for all the harm that I had caused myself, and actually ask myself for forgiveness. I mean, I had a whole process that I ended up doing several times. And what people don't realize is, accountability or responsibility is not the same as blame. I talk about this a lot in my book. For most of my life, I didn't want to take responsibility for my wrongdoing, for my shortcomings, because that, for me, that was just more evidence of what a screwed up person I was, how bad I was, right? So I would never want to admit when I was wrong. And then I realized, well, it's not about that. You actually get your power back when you take responsibility. Chapter 2 in my book is the relationship between power and responsibility. You can't have one without the other. As long as it's everybody else's fault that I feel the way I feel and that I think the way I think and do the things I do, I have no ability to change that. I have to wait for everybody else to change. So yeah, accountability, responsibility, that's how we get our power back. Our self-esteem, it also relieves the guilt. I carried so much guilt for the people that I'd harmed in my life. And the understanding that it was not about making myself wrong or beating myself up. When I went to somebody and made an amends, it was actually about mending the relationship. But I also realized, I made the amends for me. I didn't make it for the other person. I had 3 experiences when I did my 5th step and my 9th step work. And one was people were very grateful. Thank you so much. I really, when I apologized for my wrongs, some people were very appreciative, and it really helped the relationship. A lot of people said, oh, you don't have to apologize for that. I don't even remember that, And then some people said, go fuck yourself. I'm not interested in your apologies. So I realized very quickly that I don't do that for the other person. I'm doing that for me, right? It's how I get my power back. It's how I get my self-esteem back. It's how I let go of the guilt. Now, I can't make an amends. I can't take responsibility to relieve the guilt, because the second part of the step work is except when to do so would injure them or others. So I can't just try to get rid of my guilt by apologizing. I have to have some discretion about that. It's helpful to have a sponsor, somebody to direct you in how to make your amends. But just the willingness to take responsibility changes everything for me. And so it's accountability. And the life review is the ultimate expression of that. I mean, we get to see who we were in this lifetime in each of those moments, and we get to see and experience. This was the thing that really threw me when I first heard it. We get to experience how they experienced it. We get to feel exactly how that felt for them. And in many cases, we get to feel the ripple effect too. So if we do something that harms a spouse, we get to see how their spouse felt about that, or their kids or their parents. It's like we get the whole ripple effect because we're all connected. We're all one. And this is part of that process. So, and that's another question I ask to the people, to my interviewees, how do you experience oneness? How do you define oneness? How do you define forgiveness? Talk a lot about forgiveness. Forgiveness is actually the longest chapter in my book. And I actually did a TEDx talk on forgiveness. That's been a big part of in terms of having a soul plan and a lesson, forgiveness has been a big part of my journey here in this lifetime.
I love that you're bringing up forgiveness, because the clip you just shared, plus the 12 steps, taking an inventory, making amends, continue to take personal inventory, and the course talks about forgiveness too. And it talks about how when we are in forgiveness, when we're offering someone else their innocence, then, that's where we can experience our own innocence. And so if I try to put all of that together, it's like the life reviews that these experiencers have experienced, it's like they get both. They get to see how it affected people, but also to see how it affected themselves. And then the ripple effect is just like, wow, we are powerful beyond what we know, right? Like, we don't think that we have that much power, but when you really tune into, what I say to you right now has a ripple effect outward that can go really positive, really loving, or it can go the opposite. And we're not just limited to our own small little world, or what seems small, because everything is connected, everything is interwoven. And how I treat the people in my immediate life, it does affect down the road, outside of the circle as well. It's just fascinating.
Well, yeah. And a lot of people say, how can one person change the world? But it's exactly what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
When you affect one person in a positive way, that ripples out, and then they affect a positive person, and then those people affect, or they affect people in a positive way, and those people affect people in a positive way. That's how you change the world.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Course in Miracles says, seek not to change the world, choose to change your mind about it. We could talk about that. And the Course does really emphasize forgiveness. I mean, that's really, I've been studying the Course for 30 years now. I facilitate groups, the whole thing. And that for me has been a real important part of my own spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of forgiveness, for a long time, I was not interested in that at all, and I really cherish my grievances and all of that, my resentments. It's interesting. There's a woman. So part of my recovery, my actual 12-step recovery, involved codependency. And there's a woman who writes a lot about codependency, and she says resentment is victim anger, right? And so when I'm in that resentful place, that grievance place, I'm in that place of a victim. And I think it's workbook lesson number 5 in the Course in Miracles says, I am not a victim of the world I see, and to understand that we have a much bigger effect on what happens to us in our lives and to those around us than we realize, And so another question that we talk about in the film is the challenges that people face, challenges in relationships, challenges sometimes with a disability, a health challenge. And, that is part, according to everybody that I've talked to, and my intuitive knowing on this is that that's part of the soul's plan. We come here to experience these challenges, and we can either be really upset about it and resentful, or we can say, how can this move me forward in my own growth, and how can it also help others? What I learned from this. And so there's a lot in the film, and I hope that it all has an impact, in the way that you just described it. A lot of people, people have come to me now and said, wow, this is really powerful. And I have to say, my experience putting this whole thing together, there were people, a lot of the people that said yes to me to be involved in this, they had no reason to say yes to it. I'm not a famous filmmaker. I'm not established in this world. Everybody had to travel. I wasn't paying for anybody's travel expenses. A lot of them had to travel they came from all over the US, Canada. A couple of people came from Europe. One woman even came from Indonesia, from Bali. They paid their own way to be here and to be part of this. And I feel a real obligation to them for that reason. I'm trying to I want to honor everybody's commitment and their work. I'm not cutting anybody out of the film. A lot of documentary filmmakers will leave people out. I'm not cutting anybody out. Obviously, some people will end up with more time than others, but this is all so the way this came together, just astounded me. The people that said yes, and everybody's attitude about it, and everybody's and the light that they bring, it's changed my life. I'm so grateful for my own personal journey in all of this. And that's the reason I ended up interviewing 55 people, is I just loved hanging out with these people. Some of the best times was, I told everybody, look, if you fly into Newark Airport, I will pick you up. I'll bring you to the location. We'll do the interview. If we have time, I'll take you out for dinner. If not, I'll take you back to the airport the same day, if you want to do it that way. And some of the best times was in the car with these people, just hanging out with them. I'm not going to name names, but, there are people who have hung out with the Dalai Lama and traveled the world, and they have New York Times best-selling books. And they're sitting in my car in traffic on the New Jersey Turnpike. I'm driving them to the airport. And it was great. It was beautiful. It was brilliant, and so I'm so grateful for all of that.
I can feel the impact in just that short clip. Even if, this is how I feel with some of the interviews I do with most of them, it's like, even if the words aren't received as they're delivered, the frequency and the energy that's emanating from this documentary will be felt, whether you're aware, not aware, wanting to feel it, not wanting to, it will transmit. So yeah, and I loved what you said about the course too, like that powerfulness that we have, that is part of the remembering, right? We forget that we're powerful. The course says, one loving thought, just one, affects the whole sonship. So the world, right? Whatever you want to call the sonship. And that just is beyond what I think our human minds can grasp. But yet I can feel it so deeply in my heart. And I know that we're getting close on time. So I am curious if there's anything else about the documentary, the process, how near-death experiences have impacted you, just anything at all that wants to be shared or brought into the space.
Well, I would encourage people to go to the website for the film. So whateverysoulknows.com. So as you see, there's a lot of short takes, but a lot of the interviews ran for almost 2 hours. And so what I've done is I've posted everybody's individual interview on the website. So you can see everybody that you just saw. I have their entire interview. It's edited for clarity and continuity and all that, but the bulk of their interview is available because I wanted everybody's voice to be heard in full. That was really important to me. There's no charge, it's totally free. You can watch it on the website, or you can go to the YouTube channel, which is What Every Soul Knows on YouTube. All the interviews are there. You can watch them at your leisure. There's no charge or fee associated with any of that. And if it speaks to you, go to itsTimeToRemember.org, look at that website, and then just start sharing the message. Just start sharing this. You don't have to explain. I encourage people, just on your Facebook page, just put, itsTimeToRemember.org. Let people go if they want. If not, that's fine too. What every soul knows. So you can be part of what I hope is a movement where, we're helping each other wake up. Course in Miracles says you can't wake yourself, but you can allow yourself to be awakened. And the way we allow ourselves to be awakened is by awakening others, right? So that's what I'm hoping that I am able to do. My little part in this film is to help awaken people to, again, to who and what we really are. Course in Miracles says you think you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. Most of us think that we're these horrible people and that we don't deserve a good life, and that we're going to hell and all the other stuff that traditional religion has told us, traditional cultural beliefs has told us. What if none of that was true? What if you are, again, I'm quoting the Course, I can't help it. What if we are, as the Course says, you are the light of the world, right? Light and peace and joy abide in you. Yeah. What if that's who we really are? What if we've got this whole thing backwards? How would that change things? Right? What if the people that we think are so separate from us, Course tells us they're our savior, yeah. Right? When I see the Christ in them, when I see God in them, when I see spirit in them, that's how I see it in myself. As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunities for people who have an inclination, even if it's a small one, to begin to help share the message of the film. It will eventually be widely available. I'm purposely not going right now to any of the streaming services or anything like that, because having worked in Hollywood for 20 years, I want to make sure that they don't turn it into something else. So I want it to be a finished product before I go. And eventually it'll be widely available, although it won't be exclusive. I don't want anybody to have to, I love Netflix, but I don't want anybody to have to subscribe to Netflix just to see this, so there'll be multiple ways to see it. I'm hoping to do some live in-person screenings, which was great with the IONS conference. We had like 300 people there. And it was a little nerve-wracking for me because it was the first time, other than a handful of friends on Zoom, it was the first time anybody had seen it. Right. So, but it was great for me because I was watching the audience while they were watching the film. And that was the best research for me to see how people were being impacted by it. And the other thing is I'm so close to it now. I mean, I know almost every word of every interview, and it's hard for me to gauge now the impact. I have to remember the first time I heard it, but I love watching people who have their reaction, and I can see, okay, so this could be, again, as Course in Miracles says, this could be truly helpful. This could really help people. And that's what I want to do. That's why I'm doing this.
We're on the same mission. And yes, there is a collective awakening that is advancing quickly. So thank you again for just being the light of the world that you are. I have 3 questions that I ask all my guests. So the first question is, how would you define or describe God?
God is all that is. God is all there is. God, I think, Course tells us God is love, but it's not the love. It's not the feeling of love. It's the experience of perfect oneness. That's how the Course describes heaven, and that's what rings true for me. And this idea that there's joy. So the Course also says joy, peace, and love are all the same. So it's kind of all of that, but I don't think we can comprehend it with our human mind. We talk a lot about it. We put labels on it. I think it's something that, and again, you hear this in a lot of the near-death experiences. I say, Christian always says this, there are no words to describe what I experienced. So to try and put God to words, I think it's just so awesome and so beautiful and so amazing that we can't even begin to imagine what it's like while we're in this human form.
I agree. The second question is, what would you say is the purpose of life?
So again, this is one of the questions I asked. I got a lot of different responses to that. At the soul level, I think the purpose of life is to experience things. So the analogy that a lot of people use is like in heaven, in the afterlife, in the higher realms, it's kind of like reading the book on how to ride the bicycle, right? In the physical plane, in the earth plane, we're actually riding the bike. Now, there's a big difference in reading a book about riding a bike and actually getting on that bike. One of my nieces, a couple of years ago, she was learning how to ride her bike, and we took the training wheels off, and she was terrified. She was really afraid of falling, and of course, as kids, we get all scraped up and all of that. I don't think we can duplicate that. We don't have that quote unquote, that experience in heaven, because there's no contrast, or there's less contrast. There's really no physical pain. So I think we come to experience, and it's also, we come to know who we are, right? It's like, until, you don't know how kind you are until somebody crosses you, whether it's cutting you off on the highway, or a business associate, or a family member. You get to discover in that moment how kind you really are, how loving you really are, what unconditional love actually means. When you're bathed in unconditional love, and that's all there is, again, Betty says this in the documentary, it's like it becomes boring in a way. If everything is just love and light. And of course, I would point anybody to the Conversations with God material. He describes this really, really well. And he basically says, in the absence of that which is not, that which is not. So we have to, in the absence of cold, hot is not. In the absence of love, in the absence of fear, love is not, at least in our experience. So we come for the contrast. We also talk, I'm a big fan of the law of one. Law of one talks about catalyst. And so it's in relationships that we get to find out who we really are, right? And that's the whole point of all of this. And it's also for the joy of it. This is supposed to be fun. It's fun for the soul. It's not fun for the human in a lot of cases. But we have to remember, when we choose to come here and we choose this life plan, the soul's plan, and we choose the challenges, we have a whole different perspective. When you're above the battleground, as the Course would say, everything looks very different, as opposed to when you're on the ground getting shot at. So I think the thing for me is to embrace all of it, to appreciate all of it, and to love myself through it.
Awesome answer. Thank you. The final question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of yourself, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
So a lot of my daily practice now is still around self-love and self-forgiveness. I've been at this for almost 30 years. I'm still doing mirror work where I look in my own eyes and I tell myself how much I love myself, how proud I am of myself. And I think at the end of the day, that's ultimately what this is all about. It's if I can really love. So in my book, the way I define unconditional love is being willing to love myself or another when I least like who they're being. And as a parent, I'm sure you know all about this. It's loving and accepting myself and others, in my worst moments, and being my own best friend instead of my own worst enemy, empowering and encouraging myself instead of knocking myself down. It's taken me a while to get to this place, but I would say to my younger self, I love you. I value you. You're important. You're powerful. You're creating your life. Life is not happening to you. Life is happening through you and for you. And that's not just metaphor. We're finding out through quantum physics and all of that we're actually manifesting whatever we're experiencing in this moment. Course in Miracles says projection makes perception. Whatever I think I see out there, it's an outside picture of an inward condition. Mm-hmm. So we're a lot more powerful. I say this on my website for my book. I believe most of us are a lot more capable and lovable than we know.
Thank you. I love that advice. And other than the websites that you already mentioned that I will include in the description of this show, are there any other ways that people can get in touch with you?
So I would point people to the book website, which is, the title of the book is Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. And the website is bebiggertoday.com. A lot of information there. You can contact me through that. You can also contact me through the film website, whateveryoursoulknows.com, mindfulentertainment.us. There's a contact there. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, at Peter Alessandria. I might take a few days to get back to you, but you can reach out, through the contact and we can start a conversation.
Awesome. I will put all the links to everything you just said in the description. So for anyone who wants to get in touch with Peter, you can do so easily and check out all the interviews as well as all the experiences shared. So again, this has been so much fun. I'm just so thrilled that there are so many people like you that are following those whispers and the nudges and bringing this information to the world in different ways that will land on our hearts. So thank you again. It's been such an honor having you here.
Thank you, Christina. Same to you. Thanks for your contribution, your mission, your courage. I know it's not easy doing what you do. And so I'm grateful for you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends.
so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.